I'm really bothered. Let me back up. Just say I'm really bothered by how we romanticize fascistic characters,
Mhm.
whether it's Judge Dredd or Iron Man or Jack the Ripper. We had a lot of conversations about the violence and
Mhm.
about the Romans' misogyny and
Mhm.
how we felt about it. There is a point at which the conversations descend into like, we've talked about this enough. These guys are bad guys. That's why they're in hell.
My name is Zach Owens, and I work for Monkeys Fighting Robots as a writer and editor. And I'm here talking with Julian Darius and Mike Phillips about their new series, Necropolitan, for Martian Lit. You guys are working with a great team here. You have artist Stephen Leggy. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Stephen, if you're listening to this, I'm really sorry if I got it wrong. Uh, and then you have colorists Donovan Yachik and Chris Chuckry. This is a really incredible comic. Could one of you guys tell me what how would you describe it as the synopsis? What would you say?
My elevator pitch that I usually say, it's like Gangs of New York meets Highlander in Hell. What do you do, Julian? If someone ever asked you that, what's your elevator pitch?
I would probably say, first of all, it takes place in hell, but the twist is that it's all of the serial killers you've ever heard of in hell on a team together, um, fighting for halos.
Yeah, but like the Halo thing as well is one of the most interesting concepts. When you think of hell, halos aren't the first things that come to mind, but you guys have all of your characters having halos. They also have, well, not all of your characters. That's the part of the plot. So not everyone has them. They have different colors, and I think as of where we're up to in the series, there's still some like I can pick up on some of the nuances of what the colors mean and stuff, but not anything spelled out yet. Some really incredible world building. So, okay, I got some questions here for you. What led you to so you have a bunch of historical figures here. Like you talked about, you said it's all of the serial killers. You have the protagonist, if you can call him that, of the main character of Necropolitan is the Craigslist killer, and we see him first show up. He is as likable as you can probably get for a serial killer. And then you have Jack the Ripper and Elizabeth Bathory kind of as his guides through hell. You have people like Caligula. You have Adolf Hitler making a very disturbing appearance for a short time. You have Emperor Nero, Jeffrey Dahmer, and then you have people who I've never even heard of. Francisco Guerrero, who in the comic you describe as Mexican Jack the Ripper, and Madame Lalaurie, another serial killer that I hadn't heard of before. Then you have people like Dillinger, Napoleon Bonaparte, Robespierre. What led to you using these historical figures?
The secret is behind the curtain that sort of there are things that we sort of specialize in,
Mhm.
and are our particular bugbears. And I think the like the halos, I'm just full credit to Mike. I love that you like that. That's all
Yeah.
Mike, and in fact Mike is like the halo policeman that every time we get a page of art in, or colors come in, I'm just like, look, that's you. And Mike's like, Mike will say like, yeah, this is 2 shades more to orange than yellow. It needs to be, more yellow than that. No, and it's
OC,
good because it keeps it consistent.
OCD is a blessing and a curse.
Isn't it
Yeah.
CDO? It has to be alphabetical, right?
Oh, there you go. I'm not that bad, but I'm somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. But yeah, now that I've invented this thing, it's my curse for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I have to do the Halo read as the whole thing gets put together. Just one time through, watching each Halo, it's the worst.
Yeah, we're both like recovering perfectionists, which is why we come from having worked on Secward organization together and stuff like
Mhm.
that, and we basically became friends over our sheer obsessiveness, and would edit books together like day after day after day, going over every sentence. So we're both recovering. We're in recovery from that.
Yeah, that's how I found Julian. He had created this continuity pages thing on Sequart where he lists characters by their actual chronological life. So you wouldn't read Superman, Action Comics 1 through 1,000. You would read Man of Steel 28. I don't even know all the titles. Adventures of Superman 85, and you would just read it in Clark's chronological life from Monday to Tuesday, Wednesday, that way. And he's got these.
That's not even just release schedule either. That's actual chronological life that you're doing.
His life.
That's great.
Yeah, I would go through.
Wow.
No, I'd go through and read them all, and then put them in a reading order that made sense. It was just like, oh well, this issue was following up on that last story. It clearly needs to be next, even though like Action Comics came in between. And I just did that for like everything. That's just like how I read.
Did you do that for all of the like Superman comics, all of those big titles?
Yeah. I would go back and like look at like post-crisis Batman, especially, and try to put like the early
stuff. The face that Zach is making right now is the face I made when I found it. I had to search the About Us area for his email, and I'm like, I'm working for you, man.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh. Talk about attention to detail. And I will say,
and neurotic,
Yeah. Well, I will say that definitely comes through in your guys' writing here. The way that these characters work together and the way that you talk about them, it's clear that there's a lot of research that went into it. It's clear that like you didn't just throw Nero in because you were like, oh, famous bad guy Nero. Like when you get to that point in the comic, you're like, oh, Nero, interesting. And then as you're reading, you're like, yeah, that makes sense for this character playing this role. What led you to those people?
Well, I would say that, I will take some of the credit for the serial killers and like I'm a historical research guy, but selections like Nero, I mean, first of all, this started as Mike's idea for a comic. So straight up, this germinated from, I think it didn't even have a title then, but it was Mike's idea for a comic. And I think, Mike came in with a Halo idea and, the sort of Gonzo hell idea and serial killers and stuff, and we just kind of worked it together, and we worked through multiple drafts of that first issue, as it just kept changing and morphing. And we would just like Mike would call me and just be like, he'd call me at like 2 a.m. and be like, should it really be Nero? Like, I just want to revisit this, and then we talk for like an hour, and I'd be like, yeah, but the problem with that is this, and we just rehearse these conversations and go over them, rehash them. Mike, you wanna?
Well, I will say that like I was thinking about this the other day. Like, Julian is definitely the nuts and bolts guy. I had this idea that we got when we were making the Warren Ellis documentary, where he was, comparing the Authority, good guy versus bad. The question was like, are the Authority the good guy? And Warren said, well, it depends. It's all relative. Like, you'd root for Hitler if he was fighting against the devil. And I couldn't shake the idea. So then was where the germ came from. But I'm not a writer. And I equate this collaboration with me and Julian like this, like that time when you're at college and you're laying on the grass in the quad at 2 a.m. and you're looking at the stars and you're stoned out of your mind. And one of the people is like going, oh, wouldn't it be cool, man, if, right? And then the idea comes, and then the other person, being Julian, let's call him the sober one in this scenario, he's like, all right, well, how are we going to make this work? Like, I'll just throw a whole ton of shit at him, and then he's the one with the computer brain who's like, okay, there's got to be an Italian clan, and who could be in there? And like, he's an encyclopedia. He's a living encyclopedia. Yeah. So I just said, devil, Hitler, demons, halos, lots of, flaccid penises. And then he goes and bang, he comes to that last part. We'll talk about the drinking game later. But yeah, like he's like pulling out people I'd never heard of. He makes me look like, yeah, it was my idea, but he makes me, he polished the turd, so to speak.
Well, that sounds like a really productive, creative partnership. You both need both of those people in that relationship. Okay, so you actually touched on something that I loved about Necropolitan. The districts and the clans. I find that so interesting. Even there's a moment right when, because I don't want to give, there's so much about the world building that you guys do here that I almost don't want to give things away about it, but you have your main character birthed into hell in the first couple pages. You waste no time in hitting us hard with it. But there's a moment, and I'd be interested to see if Stephen Legge did this on purpose, where it almost looks like an upside down Birth of Venus, where he's like lying on the ground, and that's like the first hint we get of this like Roman influences and stuff. And then the next couple pages later, you're actually having the panels are framed by Roman columns and stuff, and we get to see that there's a whole Roman section of hell. Later, we see there's like a mafia section, and there are more sections to come, kind of hinted at. That's another idea that I'm like, where did you guys come up with that concept? That's crazy.
No, I mean, I credit this to you. I mean, I think that you, like you were saying, you sort of wanted to put all these elements in, and then I would sort of say, like, we talk. I mean, we would have like hour-long conversations about like, how did hell evolve? Like, what was hell like 300 years ago? Like, who was coming into hell and who would have been in charge there? And
yeah, and how far behind Earth technology 2017 or whatever is hell? Like, so it was cool to see like they need the people to die in order for them to go to hell and create that technology there. So all the cars are from the 70s, and a lot of the fashions are, from the 70s and before.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of conversations like that. But I remember when you were saying the Italian clan, and I was like, oh, what, you mean like the mob? You're like, no. And he just started going through all sorts of Roman and Italian history. And I'm like, oh, this is why this partnership is going to work. Yeah. I can throw an idea at him and he could be like branch.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it's just like, it feels like such a fully fleshed out world that you guys have because of those little details. I guess districts of hell aren't little details. It makes such a big difference in the whole plot, but it's just incredible. Okay.
Yeah, we were like deciding on the wealth, like how much, who's winning the game right now of Thrones, so to speak, and the Romans are definitely living in opulent, like they're out in the countryside, outside of pandemonium. Exactly, yeah. They're enjoying the fruits of their labors, which we don't see the labors, but we're seeing an orgy and like, everyone's having a great time. Well, not everyone, but, they've gotten a foothold. Like this particular clan has gotten a foothold. Yeah. Lucifer's been missing. He just went AWOL. A little shout out to Neil Gaiman for that little nip. But like, so the prisoners have taken control of the prison. And the Romans are winning, but Robespierre is like, he's got his downtown thing going on. We've got the Genghis Khan kind of like warrior clan coming in from the foothills, doing raids into the city. So yeah, it was just so much fun. Just kind of, it's a NC-17 sandbox that we're playing in. It's so fun.
But you got at something there that I think kind of sets apart Necropolitan from just being schlocky, shocking literature. Like, I think that there are some things out there where the purpose is to shock, and then they don't really like plan to do much else beyond that. Like, they shock you and they're like, ha, we did our job. And you're like, oh, but why? Why'd you do that? That's not the case with Necropolitan. Like you mentioned, the orgies, there's this aspect where you guys look at kind of the surface level evil that everyone's experiencing in a way that I think a lot of other series do, right? You get people like Jack the Ripper, and there's almost a side to it where it's like, he's a badass, right? Like, oh, no one found him. And then you guys add in that element of, no, guys, he was a serial killer and a rapist. And like, you would be really disturbed by him if you were in the same room with him. And then you have the same thing with the orgies, kind of bringing, I won't say what that is because it's a really meaningful moment in the plot, but you bring this reality to the kind of I think there's some like shitty badassery out there, that people kind of like they romanticize evil people. And you guys, I think you make us think it's that at first, and then you bring in that moment of reality, and I think it's just really incredible.
That's all, Julian.
Yeah, I mean that scene was really important to me, and Mike and I have had lots of conversations about the whole like badass thing. I mean, I am so irritated by like another gratuitous badass scene in a movie, that doesn't also do something else and add to character or add to the setting or something like that. And often it just seems so stagey and artificial to me.
Yeah.
For me, the whole Roman thing was like those aspects that you're talking about were incredibly important to me. And we had a lot of conversations about the violence and about the Romans' misogyny and how we felt about it. And there is a point at which the conversations descend into like, we've talked about this enough. These guys are bad guys. That's why they're in hell. There is this point where those sort of like arch intellectual conversations kind of tumble. But no, I think it's very important to sort of recognize like, yeah, I'm really bothered. Let me back up. Just say I'm really bothered by how we romanticize fascistic characters, whether it's Judge Dredd or Iron Man or or Jack the Ripper. And it's really easy to do a Jack the Ripper story where he's the hero and he's badass and and the truth is
got
that
away with it. How cool, like even
right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our superhero stories are about people who are vigilantes who are going outside the law. They have a lot more to do with the January 6th mob than they do, most people who, we'd be like, all right, thumbs up, we love you guys. They've got their twisted idea about what justice is, and we might agree with them. But the fact that we agree with them doesn't mean they're not committing violent acts on the street on a daily basis. And so I'm really interested in that and really interested in presentism and how we judge the past according to our own values, and we can't not do that. And it's not like there was ever a time in history in which somebody wanted to be tortured or killed, right? But at the same time, you think about how common just say child abuse was. What we would think of as child abuse, basically every human being suffered until like 50 years ago, right? Like that's mind-boggling. And you think like, does that mean that they all had PTSD? Like, did they all have that same response? Or did they not? And my answer is probably yes, they chemically had this response in their brains. They just couldn't slow down because they were too busy, surviving and getting out of that situation or struggling for food, and it's only when like Abraham Lincoln's in the log cabin that he's like, shit, I got to process this, and then he comes to a place that gets him, actually probably helps him later on in life. But so that's my take on it. But I thought it's really important not to glamorize things or
and it's just an interesting series, I think, because it starts off in a place where it feels like something you've seen before, right? It feels like, oh yeah, I can divorce myself from this reality, right? I don't need to really take any of this in. I can look at it as badassery. And then you have these little scenes, these little moments that just cut right through and go, no, think about the implications of this. Like we're not gonna do away with the implications like other stories would. We're gonna talk about them.
When Julian first came on board, I thought we were just gonna kind of keep it in those lower dimensions. Not really realizing what I was getting myself into by saying, look, I have an idea, you've got the degree, you can help me write this. But when I got to that scene, I was the first reader ever, because he took a lot of the ideas, but he scripted it. And I was the first one to read it, and I was just like, ooh, okay, he's digging in. He's like, and it hit me that this place is all times of humanity at once.
Yeah.
And how does that collision, sorry if that clap was really loud on the mic, but how does that collision of all social mores and attitudes, how do they all intermingle in this punishment dimension together? So
Yeah.
when I read that scene at first, I was like, oh, are we really going down that road? But the more, like, it's like when you hear a different kind of album from your favorite band and you need some time to really kind of be like, oh, okay, they're doing something new here. And
Yeah.
at first you're like, oh, okay, I don't know. I just want to keep hearing the same,
Yeah.
so guitar solos. But when he went and broke out the xylophone, I'm like, but then all of a sudden I'm like, it needs the xylophone now. Without the xylophone, it's just the same old three chords.
Yeah.
And I was like, shit, man. Okay, I made this. I was in the sidecar of this cool thing now that was more than just, like you said, it's big words.
No, man, you were in the driver's seat. I'm in the sidecar. I'm just going like, I've consulted the directions, and I do believe you should take a right here. And you're like, oh, thank God, we just missed that major pothole. You're a genius, And I'm like, what?
Oh, yeah. There were some early potholes. Shout out to Derek Robertson. I'm not name dropping. He really did give us some really important pointers before we went to do the self-publishing route. Like, he stepped in there and goes, readers are not going to identify with some of the things you're doing. So that was a major pothole. So thanks to Derek and Julian for helping me avoid a lot of rookie writing mistakes.
Well, and Zach, that thing about like implicating the reader, that is a like fetish of mine. Like I love that. I am so, and I think I want people to be able to sort of like know that, and most of the audience is going to probably forget that and move on, right? And you never know, and you can't control how anyone's going to read and what people are going to take away.
But I think they almost become part of the satire at that point to me. Like, like it's like if you don't get it, then you're part of the issue. Like I actually kind of felt when I was reading Necropolitan, it reminded me of like a Tarantino movie. I think that his movies come off as those schlocky shock fests, and then he has those scenes in it where he goes, "No, this isn't okay, but you're enjoying it, aren't you?"
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, absolutely.
And you have those moments where a person with a decent moral compass is going to watch that in the theater and go, "Oh," and then the guy sitting next to them is going to go, "Ha ha ha," and they're going to be, "Oh," at the guy too. And I think that that's just like a. Sorry, I'm nerding out on the thoughts over here.
No, you keep making those comparisons, Zach. Well, and you picked up on that, also because you're a smart reader and you're sensitive to that, and people. No, that's true. But I mean, people come to these.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, but see, part of being a smart, sensitive reader is getting to that scene, getting that, and then taking it and applying it to the rest. And keeping it like compartmentalized in part of your brain as you're getting to the schlocky fun stuff, right? And that's what you're talking about in Tarantino is like you're watching somebody's face be cut off, but you remember that earlier conversation about violence and about how this guy actually is horrible, or you're presented in a way so that somebody is presented as that badass that you really love them, but then the shot of them cutting somebody's face off is so gratuitous and goes on so long that it becomes uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And and there is this way in which it plays on your emotions. And I'm obsessed with this idea and these dynamics. And I always think about like serial killer movies. I think horror movies are more honest. Like people will be like, no, Mike loves the Leprechaun movies, and it's just like I love.
I've actually talked about
creative.
That.
Yeah. Well, and so for me, it's like
I'll be right back.
What I am disturbed by is he's whipping out his Leprechaun special edition.
VHS in space.
Incredible. I've still gotta watch the Leprechaun movies. Mike assures me that they are.
No, you really don't. But I mean, okay.
That being said, Jason X is one of my favorite Friday the 13th movies, so I think I'm gonna enjoy.
Yeah, oh, you'll love it. You'll love it. We were in Denver. Side note: we were in Denver, me and my buddies, and we had bonded over Leprechaun, Leprechaunathons, we would call them in college, and we were in Denver visiting after college, and we had this hankering after the bar. We were driving back to our friend's apartment, and we stopped by the Blockbuster or whatever the place was in Denver, and we go in, and we just kind of slap our hand on the counter and say, "Sir, we need Leprechaun now." And his response was, "No one needs Leprechaun." He doesn't get it, but like, yes, you do need a little. This is called the pot of gore. This is the first 3 movies.
Pot of gore. That's amazing. I love it.
Yes. All right. Sorry, you can edit that out.
No, that was we better not, because that was brilliant.
Well,
Now I'm
and
thinking, was I influenced by Leprechaun when I was writing Necropolitan? I like to think so. Warwick
I think
Davis.
so. I see it there. Okay, so next question. Where did the Craigslist killer come from? Because this actually, I think, kind of ties in this idea of, I don't know, like gore, violence, or whatever that you'll excuse because it's likable in a strange kind of way.
Well, I don't want to say it wasn't always the Craigslist killer.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that was one of those things, and I don't want to go too deep into it, but it's one of those things that changed in those drafts before issue 1 came out, that radically changed.
Okay,
so it wasn't always.
Now I kind of do want you to go into it. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't have to. You don't have to, but you have peaked.
Mike, I'll leave it up to you. I mean,
this goes back to what I was saying about thank you to Derek Robertson for saying your point of view character needs to be have a little something.
Let's confess it. Let's give Zach the exclusive here.
Okay, I mean, what the Dahmer thing?
Yeah. So originally, this starred Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, he was our point of view character.
Okay,
he was the one born out of the Hell Matron. And Derek was like, "I'm sorry, like there's nothing here a reader is gonna latch onto. Like everybody is unlikable." So it was kind of like, all right.
Well, I mean, I will say in retrospect, like we just had this tremendously successful Netflix series on Dahmer, and I was like,
yeah, now,
yeah. But
we just needed the rest of the world to get as depraved as us, and
we weren't there yet.
Ahead of the curve.
But I think one of the things that Derek pointed out and that we realized was correct was that I think that Dahmer had recently died, and I think that I have not that reason, but I mean I think that I had always been fascinated by Dahmer in this sense. I mean I'm a kind of serial killer buff, and I like serial killer movies. That's where I come from. That kind of violence.
Sorry, I interrupted you with your you're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer and
well. Yeah, I mean, I think that's that was sort of one of my problems. And I think that, like Mike is sort of praising me as like the architect, right? I mean, I think my brain is an architectural brain, but I think that, as the guy who like comes in and adjusts everything and, writes the script and sort of, puts the characters, the crazy ideas into categories and stuff like that. And some of that's true, but I also think that I have a problem in that, like, my brain is also really, I mean, obviously all of our brains are unique, but my brain is really comfortable with not liking characters, and also comfortable with like all of those dynamics that we've been talking about. For example, I love Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal Lecter, and I unapologetically, I'm just like, yeah, no, he's a terrible person, right? But I mean, I'd love to hang out with him, just not long enough to be on his killer victim list, right? Right. And so I unapologetically, I'm very conscious of the fact that like these dynamics. And so for me, I'm not bothered by Dahmer, and I've always been fascinated by the idea that I believe that there was no reason to doubt his conversion in prison. And I think that people doubted it, when he died. I remember everybody was so happy, and I was like, he's a human being. I mean, what he did was obviously awful, but what he did was, my take on it was that you have to feel really miserable about yourself and really desperate for love to like pour acid in somebody's brain so that they won't leave you, right? Like there's a dynamic there that I wanted to explore, and I thought, shouldn't his conversion be legitimate, right? Like he would be in hell and be like, I'm not a serial killer anymore. Like I'm a good guy. I'm a Christian. Like I was bathed in the blood of Jesus Christ, and why am I here?
Yeah.
So, and basically Derek was like, no, that's a bridge too far. Like the audience is not like, I've done effed up stuff, and the audience is not gonna go along with this.
Mm.
And I just kind of realized, oh yeah, wait a minute, the audience isn't composed of copies of myself, which
Yeah,
I
you kind of want to listen to the co-creator of Transmetropolitan and the Boys about fucked up stuff,
Yeah.
He's got kind of a PhD in fucked up stuff.
He definitely does.
Super nice guy too.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, like, that's what really changed the game from my dopey idea into something next level that feels so fun to work on, because the voyeurism is there. Like, it's a fantasy world. It's anytime you go to that, it's an escape. You want to see weird shit. You want to see fucked up shit. You want to see stuff that you don't see in your normal life.
Mm-hmm.
That can just really trend right into the schlock bin. Yeah. But what Julian did, he turned it into dimensional, like 30-dimensional chess, like overnight. That's hyperbole, but like, he really added a whole element that I never would have come up with. Like, collaborating with him has been a joy. He makes me look good.
Well, same thing with you, brother.
Yeah, baby.
You guys are so incredibly nice to each other that I think that you're gonna definitely have to work with each other again. Either that, or there's a lot of deep-seated rage that's going on right now, and you're just both trying to throw each other off the scent. That's what I'm gonna.
No, I love this man. This man is my brother. 20 years we've been together making. I mean, we've made, I don't know what, 45 nonfiction books and 8 documentaries, and now comics, our own comics, and it's a marriage. He's my brother.
You're married to your brother. Yeah. Beautiful.
That's the next issue. Dude, you just spoiled the next issue of Necropolitan, man.
Yeah, well, we've had it out. We know where we stand. I mean, any of that deep-seated rage has been addressed long ago. And,
it's out there.
We have.
It's not deep-seated. It's just seated at this point.
That's why he has to live 6 time zones away, man.
Okay.
I just point out that you're in Africa, I'm next to Philly, and he's in Honolulu. It's pretty amazing. Zoom is awesome.
It is technology.
No lag.
And they don't have Zoom like this in hell, right?
Not yet. Because the creators of Zoom haven't died. So
that's it.
Yeah. They barely have phones. They have rotary phones at this point.
Yeah. Okay. You kind of got at something that I found really interesting reading this. There's a lot of Christian imagery that goes on. You have actually a cameo of Dahmer where you have that conversation about whether his conversion was legitimate or not. And it's like a meaningful cameo. And now understanding that he was going to be the point of view character, that totally makes sense. But there's a lot of Christian imagery that goes on throughout. There's mention of characters there being devout Christians. Nero has his Christians that he uses for various reasons, but it's also like in many ways kind of like a Judeo-Christian version of hell, right? There are a lot of those aspects. Even talking about a character like Lucifer. Lucifer's from Judeo-Christian background. So where did that influence come from? Where did the decision to not just make a generic hell, but use a lot of the Judeo-Christian ideas of hell come from?
But all I'll say is, from my point of view, I was raised in a Christian home, Protestant, and fell out of it quickly. My parents got divorced. My mom became a born-again Christian. I think she was kind of chasing down something, trying for some sort of redemption, a lot of guilt for, breaking up the family. So my take on a lot of this stuff comes from a sarcastic, cynical place. So in my mind, when I was germinating this, it was going to be that version of hell with those characters. But again, Julian he's got the depth of knowledge here to really 3D this thing. It's about as far as I went. So I think this is a Julian question.
Well, I mean, what I think is amazing is that, like, what you said was so deep and profound about your childhood and about the way that religion was always already coded in your brain, right? So,
Mm.
the way in which religion is something that can give us solace, right? But also, maybe it's superficial because we reach to it in troubled times, right? Like there's that sort of saying or line of thought, like, you don't reach out for Jesus when you're, living the high life, right? You reach out when you're in the gutters and life knocks you down, right?
Mhm.
And that's a bit of a cliche, but there's a lot of truth to it. And so I think, like, what you just said, Mike, came across as, having a lot of emotional charge and having a lot of depth to it. But I think that you sort of put it down or trivialize it, and then I come in and I do bring I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, well, like Lucifer wasn't even a concept, okay, until the Middle Ages, right? Like, Lucifer fell from heaven in the Bible. It's not even clear what that is, right? It could just be a star. It's not even,
Yeah.
it's very ambiguous. Like, it's not Satan in the Garden of Eden. It's a snake, and this is a story about how he lost his legs. Like
And even
historically, these are
the word Satan means accuser, right? So it's yeah.
right, and that's there in Job, right, where Satan is not the devil's advocate. The devil is the devil's advocate, right? He's the one who prosecutes you in the court in heaven. Literally, it's like there's like a Boston legal scene going on in Job, where Lucifer's like, yeah, but he's just doing this because he's gave him all this wealth and wives and kids and stuff. So yeah, I mean, we're very conscious of the fact that all of this is our take on this. I think we wrestle with the way it's depicted. We have had a lot of those conversations, and I think that I would just say I was raised in a Judeo-Christian context, and that's sort of the framework of my society. So I come from that kind of bias. I've studied it. I mean, my master's degree I did Milton, as my thesis. So I come from, like, having thought a lot about Milton, right? So that sort of theodicy of really exploring how the cosmos is structured under that is a lot easier for me in a Christian context. Having said that, it's fraught with error and contradiction and all those sort of, like, interesting points. Like, why would a just God sentence somebody to go to a punishment dimension for eternity, right?
And that's another
and then
one
you
of
get
those
in.
things that kind of theology was built out of very little, right? There's no clear, non-poetic reference to the eternity of hell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and but then also there's this thing that really fascinates me, that different religions have emphasized different things, right? And one of the most fascinating aspects of Christianity is that it's so focused on the next world, right? Think not of the morrow, right? The key people, it's true that, like, Jesus preached love, and we remember the Sermon on the Mount, but if there's one message that was even more unique and even more the focus of Jesus Christ's original ministry, it was, think not of the morrow. The apocalypse is coming imminently, and this world will burn, and it doesn't matter, follow me through the wilderness, right? And we're gonna, because, like, leave your homes, abandon your homes, abandon your families. It doesn't matter. The end of the world is nigh, right? And that was really felt, and that is very explicit, right? And then that doesn't happen, right? but this is a religion that's very focused on like the next world, right? Like you suffer in this one, peace in the next, right? You want to get to heaven. What's most fascinating about that for me is that Christianity has largely failed to depict heaven in a convincing way. That heaven is depicted as sort of like clouds and fields, and like there's a Roman cherub there with like going. I'm doing like the Wayne's World thing, right? Like strumming his little harp, and and then everybody's praising God all day, and and you think, right? Was that appealing? Was that ever appealing to anyone? Like it's not.
Where did that imagery even come from? I like.
Well, it evolved slowly over time, but I mean, like it's easy to make fun of the idea that you are rewarded with virgins in heaven, but at least that's a depiction of heaven that's easier to imagine than this kind of abstract thing. Whereas hell has been, I mean, you look at Dante, right? Who reads Paradise? We don't assign students to read Purgatory and Paradise. We want them to read Inferno, right? Because it's fun. You think of like Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. It's like that's where it really took off, was where they went to hell and he's going down for Abby, that's true. Sandman stuff. Hell always works. Dante works. Milton works, right? Hell is always fascinating, especially if you can get it right. And I think it's interesting to me that a religion that's so focused on the afterlife and so focused on your heavenly ward and I'm going to go to heaven, it winds up being paradoxically so focused on hell and on punishment.
Yeah, really interesting. What I find interesting about the series Necropolitan, right, when I read it, is while you have these Judeo-Christian things baked into it, and you have things like Dahmer being in hell and having had a real conversion, or things like Francisco Guerrero being a devout Catholic and stuff. It's really interesting, but I'm actually Christian myself, and I can sit there and read it and not find any of it. I don't think that it is ever shaming or ever like disrespectful to people or anything like that. But it's getting at these concepts where it's like, okay, people say they believe one thing and then they do these hideous acts. How do we deal with that? And would they still waking up the next day in hell and still being a devout Catholic in that context after having been a serial killer all your life? That's a certain level of self deception that's going on.
We've had this conversation a couple of times, and we're going to definitely kind of weaponize that idea. We're going to turn that into something.
Yeah.
There's some people who did not lose their faith just because they entered the prison. And they're people who will become valuable possibly later in the story.
Interesting. I'm looking
dot.
I just want to say, Zach, that like what you said is really important to me, and I want to thank you for that. My mother, converted to being a fundamentalist Christian when I was, while I was growing up, and I sort of was raised with this sort of like amorphous, vague kind of Christianity. That was, very wobbly, very vague, very sort of Midwestern white Protestant. But whatever I personally think, I respect religious views. Yeah. And I think there's depth there. And it's really important to me that, it's not just, defecated on for entertainment value, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we can do whatever, it's hell. We can do whatever we want. We're the writers. We definitely feel empowered to do that. But I mean, taking ideas seriously and taking faith seriously and not just treating it as a punchline, is really important to me. But those contradictions, that are in all of us. I mean, the truth is, like, I'm very inspired by the Sermon on the Mount personally. But
me too.
I'm not gonna like when was the last time that I went out and said, you know what, I'm gonna invite a homeless guy into my house? you know. I'm going to, like, I don't really, I've got, you know what, I've got too much money, like I'm going to, what would happen if I halved, my reason? No, I mean, I'm struggling to pay a mortgage, I mean, we don't usually do that. And I think the example of Guerrero is fascinating to me. Like, in one sense, it's completely you can see it as completely self-deceived. You can also see it as like the height of faith, right? There's that story by the guy who wrote Arrival of a man who is completely pious and who's sentenced to hell. That I read after we did Necropolitan. And, the idea is sort of unless you are, people talk about submission to God, right? Like, I mean, Islam literally means submission, right? And Christianity is very focused on, God's got the plan, right? Well, we don't understand what the plan is, or his methods, but, we have to submit to it and know that. What happens when you believe that and then you wind up in hell? Well, God had a reason for this. I don't know what that reason is, right? It's not for me to say, yeah, this means I'm like you could say this means I'm a bad person, right? Maybe. It could also mean you're there to help somebody.
Yeah.
It could also mean, I mean, who knows, right? I don't know. Or maybe, even though if you believe that hell is forever and, like basically you die and then God has made one decision, right? You go one place or the other. What about the possibility of redemption in hell?
Yeah.
Can you go to hell and say, all right, obviously I've been a terrible person. I wound up in hell, but I still believe and I still want to figure out how to make this a better place, even though it's hell. I think all of those are fascinating ideas. And in some sense, I look at that and say, oh, that's true faith.
Yeah.
Like, not to say that like these serial killers are, should be held up as paragons, but
you take the theme, you take the writing to uncomfortable places of faith, but never to dismissive places of faith. Like you go to those weird theoretical questions that I would say a lot of people of faith as well wouldn't want to consider. And you go, well, I mean, think about it, just put it in there, think about it, and see what you come out with. And I think that it's actually really cool because it shows how seriously, even if you don't believe it, how seriously you take it. And it's not something that you guys dismiss in how you talk about it. I think that's a really cool aspect of
and that's been a fun part of the collaboration, is deciding which of those people down there are there to be redeemed. Is that an avenue we're going to take? Are some of them down there mysteriously, and we're going to find out later why they're there, or have some been planted there because there's this greater battle going on? So there's a lot of like fun, back and forth we have on all this stuff. It's just a joy to like kind of just take it in all avenues.
There's a ton of mystery to Necropolitan. There's so many unanswered questions once you get to the end of that's another one of those things where it's not a series. There's so many series out there, when they're world building, they really sometimes overdo the explanation of kind of like taking the reader by the hand and being like, okay, this character who should be able to pick up some of these things, we're gonna explicitly explain. And you guys do a lot of brilliant world building through having people like Jack the Ripper and Elizabeth Bathory take the Craigslist killer through hell and show him around and tell him some of the rules. But at the same time, what's great is those are dismissive characters who don't want to answer his questions. So you keep intact so much of that mystery and leave us wanting more answers. You're not like,
that's one of my favorite parts. Again, I get to be the first reader of Julian stuff. So there's a part in the third issue. By the way, Julian crushed Jack the Ripper in the third issue. It's so good. I laughed out loud many times. But there was there's a big reveal. We're not going to say it, obviously, but there's a huge reveal at the end of the third issue, in the climax. And um, Elizabeth says she's talking with Mark, the Craigslist killer. And then she goes over to Jack to verify this thing. And Jack's like, I didn't see shit. Like, there's a moment there for exposition.
Yeah.
But the fact that Julian just like, nah, not yet. It's a fun tease almost. He's just like,
Yeah.
And Jack's just kind of leaning back in his chair. He's like, I didn't see shit. I'm too tired to talk. And it was just like, this is so fun.
You guys hold the information tightly in the script, and I think that's what makes makes it such an intriguing read. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Well,
sorry, go for it.
yeah, I mean, I want to say, real quick, first of all, just to get back to that earlier point that, that kind of like self contradiction of sort of like, do we follow our religious convictions through? That's not unique to Christians or to any religion. I mean, atheists are as contradicted, right? We all compartmentalize, right? Mm-hmm. And I think part of what's cool actually about Christianity is that it asks us not to compartmentalize, right? And to love our neighbor, right? Not just love our family, but love our neighbor. And I mean, that's an amazing, as ourselves, right? It's an amazing thing and a real challenge, and a challenge not to compartmentalize in a society based on it compartmentalizing. And I mean, but this thing about exposition, like, man, Mike breaks my, so Mike, this is true. You love the scripts, and you love Jack the Ripper, but also Mike rakes those scripts over the coals and makes them better. And one of the key ways that he makes them better is by making them less exposition-y. Mm-hmm. Because I'm just like, this is the way it is, just like, this character could say this, we can get this information across this way. And Mike's like, characters have been, this is like a 40-page issue of characters doing nothing but telling you how the rules of hell work, like, this is too much, Julian, and it forces me to kind of think about how to do it in different ways, or get this information across in ways that maybe aren't as artificial. So, but that's something that you and I, Mike and I, have both gone back time and time again, reading the finished issues and talking about how we feel about the level of information that's revealed and how it's revealed. So I really appreciate what you're saying, Zach.
Well,
we yin yang each other really well.
Yeah. And that's an amazing skill to have, Mike, because the amount of times I have read a comic book series or an issue or something along those lines, and I've been like, I love this idea, and boy, do I want to read more, but I can't. My brain won't let me, because I just want to take a red pen to all of this dialogue that doesn't need to be there, Yeah. And you guys do that so well in Necropolitan, of just,
Thank you.
Holding on to that information, because I have so many questions left after those first 3 issues. I feel like the story's barely gotten started. On that note, how long do you hope Necropolitan to go for? Is it kind of like open-ended, or do you have a general idea?
Yes.
I'll take that answer.
Julie, do you want to huddle for a second, and can we mute Zach? I don't know. I mean, if we were on some sort of like Marvel bullpen deadline where we had to deliver a script every 30 days, I'm sure the compliment you just gave us wouldn't fly, because we've had a long time to put together this. What was it? What's it, Julian? 110 pages? Our first story.
28 or 24.
So I mean, we've had a lot of time to stare at this stuff, and it grows in the telling, as usual. So we have the first season. Mm-hmm. Pretty much, we know what we want to do. We've got this first arc that we just finished, and we're going to do a second arc that takes place kind of. I'll just say it because it's fun for me to think about it. This is another wacky brainchild of me. It's Thomas Edison, from his hell birthday, up until the 80s. So we're going to learn more about the Genghis Khan clan and the techno wizards of the volcano area, which is Aleister Crowley and John Parsons Whiteside and
my gosh,
Henry Ford. and
I am.
Thomas Edison.
You
It's
guys
gonna be
need to
fun.
just come out with this now, okay? Like, I don't care how long this takes. I'm giving you a week. All right, that's as long as I'm.
Issue 4 is like 75% scripted, but I had to hand it over to Julian because again, I reach a certain ceiling, which is basically 20 feet below his basement, and he needs to kind of take it. And don't shake your head. Don't shake
It's
your
not
head.
true. I mean, it's but no, I mean, I do have more experience as a writer, but part of that experience, I mean, I don't know how to, what it feels like looking at myself from outside, right? And there are things that are intuitive to me that just based on that experience, I'm like, yeah, do it this way and move this piece there. And other people watch it and they're like, how did you know all that? Well, it's just I've spent 50,000 hours doing this, right? It's not my amazing brain or something. But Mike's problem is that he doesn't have the confidence. So Mike will write something amazing, and I'm like, well, maybe I tweak this or that. But he doesn't. He's got the confidence of a writer who hasn't put in the 50,000 hours, and so I'm like, oh no, this is good. Everything's working here. You might adjust this little thing on the periphery, and and he's like, is he blowing smoke up my butt? Like, is this, is it really this good? Is this okay? And he second guesses everything, which I think makes it probably better in the long run. Whereas I might even get a little sloppy because I'm like, I've done this before. You just do it this way. And Mike's like, yeah.
We're both great. We love each other. So yeah, so the second arc is going to be issues 4, 5, and 6, and then we're going to do a couple of like one-shotty type things. Oh, we have no OGN coming out too, which is kind of like in the vein of Lost or Orange is the New Black when they tell an episode that kind of before they were in the joint. You know what I mean? Like before they were on the island or before they were in the jail.
Okay.
So we want those to kind of like be these, one shot or OGN type deals where we're going to tell the origin. This is Julian just banged this out in a couple of weeks when he was in New Zealand, I think, right?
Yeah. Well, I didn't bang it out in a couple of weeks. I mean, it took me probably a couple months, but I did finish.
Anyway,
I did finish it in New Zealand.
Yeah.
In part because you were going through a rough patch, and I was like, because it's so hard.
Yes, this was Julian's love letter to me. He's like, oh, Mike's not feeling great right now, so he wrote an OGN based in the world I created as a gift to me.
Oh my God,
it was the nicest thing.
You really are married brothers.
We are absolutely. But yeah, so the first season will end around, I want to say, issue 10 plus the OGN. But then after that, I mean, it's just kind of just nebulous little, like, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But
yeah,
I mean, 30 issues would be awesome.
Yeah.
Speaking of 30 issues, Julian, you just crossed almost the 30 issue mark in Martian Comics.
No, we crossed it. We're over it now.
Other like world that he's been just kind of rocking on his own. A little shout out to Julian's Martian universe there.
Awesome.
This guy is prolific.
Well, thank you for that.
How do you find the time with all the hopping around the world so that the FBI don't seize your laptop too?
He's on the lam. You got a lot of time when you're on the lam, man. You just need a Wi-Fi connection.
I do think I do think the pull quote here is forget your beautiful review on the site.
Forgotten. We're good.
The real pull quote is, if these guys aren't on an FBI list, we're doing something wrong. Which actually probably is a great pull quote.
Welcome to use it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel lazy. I'm a workaholic. I am wrestling with that. That's one of the things that I would like to do better at in my growth and my spiritual growth. I think I'm lazy. I think I'm ugly and lazy and, can't function socially. And, so my self-image is like totally not, related to like massive dysmorphia going on. But
for what's worth, I think you're beautiful, hardworking, and interesting to talk to. So just gonna throw that in there.
Well, thank you, Zach. Right back
Oh,
at you. I mean, I appreciate that. Means a lot more than you delivered a brilliant script. Because like I know I can do a brilliant script. I don't know that I can look good.
is this the
That's
perfect place to inject that we have a flaccid penis drinking game in Necropolitan? Is this? Did I shoehorn this in at the wrong time?
I,
so
I,
to speak.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Mike's referring to the peen quotient of sort of how much peen. Do you want to
Here's
did
the
you
thing,
count
though.
them
This
up?
is all Steve's
Did
fault.
you
This is
count them
all.
up?
It's not like we even wrote the word penis in the script one time.
It
Steve's
was
got an issue, man.
Steve was just like, how many can I fit in here?
We've had one penis conversation. One.
And what was it?
now?
Wait, okay. What was the
You
conversation?
can
Was it
guess it. I
you?
bet you can guess it.
Was it you and Julian going, Steve, we want as many penises in here as we because
No,
you
that's
can't
not it.
you can't actually like throw blame on him at that point if that's what the conversation was. All right.
No, you can't throw Steve under the bus. I got to stick up for Steve. Like Steve said, and Steve, to be fair, Steve's the one who did all those like Will Eisner-esque, Roman archways and stuff. Like, at
Incredible.
best, I ever hint at that kind of stuff. But like Steve always is concerned with page layout in a way that Mike and I, are not. And we can diagram a page or whatever, but he's always going to do what he's going to do. And sometimes we're like, wait, that panel was the focus in my head, and you've made something else the focus, but it works. And I think that's the genius of collaboration, especially with an artist,
Oh,
because
God, yeah, he's an awesome
Steve is brilliant.
Awesome ad libber for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
the moment
He
when
makes us look better.
absolutely, the moment I realized that was when near the end of the first issue, when we get back to Elizabeth Bathory's quarters, and the woman who she's going to, for lack of a better word, enjoy later is kind of in a certain precarious position. And you didn't put this in the script. She kind of like wraps her knuckles lovingly against the bars of the cell.
Yeah.
And it's just tap, 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 tap. The knuckles, you can just see the taps behind the knuckles as she's lovingly going, oh, I'll get back to you in a minute, honey. And it's all
super
in
creepy.
The picture. It's not in the script. There's no words about it. It's just like there's a taunting, there's a lovingness, and I'm just like, this dude is awesome.
And that's right up there with that first kind of like Jack the Ripper moment that we kind of referenced earlier in our conversation, where I went, oh, this isn't your typical badass Jack the Ripper. This man's disgusting. And I almost don't want to read about him, And that moment where you have that turn of, no, here's reality. That happens in that moment too with the tapping. It's like, oh gosh, no, I don't like that. That went further than I was comfortable with, but it's genius because that's exactly what you guys are going for.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it's that element of like surprise. Of surprise is always sort of delightful for the brain, but if you can get that surprise sort of like Hollywood script style to be doing multiple things, right, and making you reevaluate, or suddenly part of the surprise is that I'm shocked about a character that I wasn't thinking deeper enough about. But I mean but to Mike's point, that's all Steve. I mean, like that's the kind of thing that, having written a lot of comics now, I would be scared to put in a script, because I would think, there are things that you kind of consciously avoid in a script because you don't know how the artist is going to do it, and you see all the ways it could go wrong, right? And with experience, you start to realize, like, oh, okay, this is a territory where, if it goes wrong and they just draw, like, most artists would just draw, a hand touching a bar, passing by a bar, and maybe you get a line or something, but then you think, oh my God, now I'm going to have to put a caption there, or I'm going to have to like adjust the dialogue to explain
what that is.
Which not enough writers do, and go back and tweak everything. But Steve, you don't need to do that with him.
In fact, he adds those moments in. That's
Yeah,
incredible.
We've
so
had
he does
both
do
kinds
ad
of
lib stuff now.
collaborators. Sorry. I just want to say we've had both kinds where either they're just kind of reading the script and they're delivering it without any extra oomph, and you get the creator, you get the artist like Steve who feels like a legitimate co-creator. Not only is he kind of adding his own brain to the script, but he's putting things in that gives us ideas for future stories. I mean, it's a true, you know, recipe. It's a true like stew that he's not just kind of like the sous chef. He is like he's there with us. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
In
Well,
wonderful, beautiful, unexpected ways.
this is an incredible book. One of the things that I love about it, the like flourishes that you guys add in, is the toy ads that you have at the end of like you can get the Hell Matron that births the Craigslist killer. You can get like the car that they drive around in, and Elizabeth Bathory's bathtub with the blood inside. Just add water. Um, where'd that come from? That's another incredible thing.
Yeah, that was
Hurting
my
our own
idea.
childhood.
Yeah, I remember, that was a wacky Julian idea, and then Steve ran with it, and would sort of deliver, like a version of what I described, and then I'd be like, oh, okay, that means I can take these other ideas that you didn't incorporate and put them in the next issue, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I love like I'm a little younger than this, but I love '80s culture, right? I was a little kid in
It
the
gives
'80s.
you like 80s TV
Oh
ads
yeah.
in the
Well,
middle
and
of
it's like,
cartoon
remember,
that stops
like
and
RoboCop had a TV series,
yeah.
and it's like they were alien figures in Walmart, what kid is like, I just saw Alien. I want to reenact that stuff. Give me a Xenomorph action figure. I mean, there were a lot of weird junctures like that. I mean, and you think about like, GI Joe, like yeah, they use lasers, but I mean, like, my parents didn't want me to have those because they were war toys, and my parents thought that if I got into them, I would wind up dead in Vietnam, basically. Like
Yeah.
the trauma of Vietnam was so huge for them and their generation.
They were
Um,
worried that those toys would traumatize you and twist you in some way, and that you would become an adult who created, you know, artwork and stuff that would just disturb the masses. But
that's
I,
right.
I don't know why they were worried.
Dodged a
You
bullet
know,
there.
thank God that never happened.
No, I mean, they were
And by
worried
the
that
way, sorry, go ahead.
that I'd love the military and go to war. But yeah, that's exactly how it turned out is, twisted stuff. Although I'm always amazed by, like, I think I've got a reputation for like having an awkward, weird sense of humor and making, jokes about violence or whatever. Once you get to know me. Um, uh, that I always have these conversations with Mike where I'm like, all the most messed up, horrible ideas were all you, buddy.
Uh,
That's why Mike keeps shifting
thanks.
credit, is because he doesn't want to actually take ownership from
It's all Julian.
he likes his laptop too much.
I
Um,
wanted to add one thing about those again with Steve. Like he was so good at making. I don't even know how he did it, but he made it look like they were plastic
yeah,
figures. Like
yeah.
yeah. I don't know that style, but it looks like you're looking at
It
little
looks like a real toy.
GI Joe figures.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, and the play sets. And like you were mentioning, was it Mask? I was never familiar with Mask. Wasn't it like a gas station or something that you
Yeah,
did?
there was a gas station that like turned into a state, war station, as like, laser guns would fall out of the engine. But the Hell Matron thing makes me think of, like, you remember in the '80s there was a like fad for slime. And I remember, like, you could go to like a grocery store, and I remember buying, you would put a quarter in and get like one of those plastic eggs filled with
Yeah.
slime. And I had like so much slime and got it on the carpet of my house. My parents hated me, but I could just walk to the store, grocery store, and get more slime. So they could not control this. Um,
I
and there
want to
was
know how much slime you had. That's an amazing. We have to
I
talk
had a
about
lot.
it
It
later.
all dried out too. Like it all gets dry eventually. But it got on the carpet, it got on the dogs, it was terrible. I was a terrible kid. But
Weirdo.
remember there was like this whole fad for slime, and you had like Ghostbusters, there's like Slimer, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. But there's Masters of the Universe. There were like slime play sets where like a
Oh,
bucket
Castle
of slime would fall
Grayskull.
on
Yeah.
people, and but there were these play sets a little later than Castle Grayskull that incorporated slime. And so the Hell Matron is kind of like a throwback to the 80s slime era.
The
Incredible.
afterbirth.
Oh my god.
The slime afterbirth.
Isn't that what the
That
slime
is
was?
what it is, right?
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
saying, oh, you're
technically.
clutching your pearls, Julian. You fucking wrote it, man.
It's like,
It's still
gross.
just like, yeah.
Oh, my stars and garters, Julian.
All right.
Lordy.
This has been such a fantastic chat, talking to you guys about Necropolitan. I have one last question for you before we're done here. Where can people get a hold of it?
If you go to martianlit.com and under comics, go to Necropolitan or click on one of those covers, you'll go to the page for Necropolitan. All of the issues are available on Amazon and Kindle and also on PDF at Drive-Through Comics, which is a great site, if you don't already know it.
Don't actually.
Have
to check it
yeah,
out.
and you can get PDFs, and we do all ours DRM free. It's a good site, and we're also putting together the trade paperback. So the trade paperback will collect 1 through 3, and that'll be more widely available. And also we have a Patreon. I think it's just patreon.com/Martian, and then people there get the PDF and CBC versions of it, and occasionally we'll run a Kickstarter as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're excited. 2023 is going to be good because we'll have the TPB out and the OGN out this year. Hopefully, the OGN. It's what would you say, about 2/3?
Yeah, it's 2/3 done.
Yeah.
We've seen some of the artwork, so hopefully that'll be done before the end of the year.
The title for
but
the OGN, is it just Love Letter to
yeah,
Mike?
it's a
It's the grossest
Necropolitan.
love letter ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very different because it has less of that sort of gonzo over the top hell stuff, right? It's more that flashbacks, that episode.
Yeah.
So that's part of why, plus it was just me writing it, so that's part of why it is an OGN instead of in the regular series. But its subtitle is the life and death of Mark Hernandez.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, so it sort of takes you through like from his birth to his death.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
His
so
Earth
it's like
death,
his,
of course.
yeah, his Earth death, right? So you see him, as a kid, and sort of like, yeah, you get into his head, and I think, yeah, remember he's dealing with the death of his daughter.
Mhm.
So like I wrote this as a love letter to Mike, but I think it was probably disturbing to Mike.
Love letter's the wrong word. It was a pick me up. But
I think that disturbs me more. I'm gonna read it and be like, "This is a pick me up from Mike."
Julian is so
Mike
charming. He writes a story about basically Dexter meets To Catch a Predator, and just to cheer me up.
Yeah, you will watch a man disintegrate. Yeah, it's rough.
Maybe it was inspired by my disintegration.
A little advertisement for the OGN when it does come out. If you want to feel picked up, or if you want to watch a man disintegrate, this has both. So, and if you want to watch the Leprechaun movies too, you can always do that. All right. Well, thanks. And the Martian comics. Those are great. Thank you, Julian. Thank you, Mike, for taking so much time to talk about this. Awesome.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having us.
Everybody out here who's watching this, you guys got to go read Necropolitan. It's incredible stuff, and I cannot wait to see where this series goes.